Hey everyone, it's Dr. Ramani and whoo, Succession. That's the end of that. And the disgusting brothers come out on top, as we would expect them to. So much to unpack here. And what a absolute walk through the world of narcissistic, not only family systems, but also narcissistic people, narcissistic businesses. We learned it all. And I have to tell you, they were pitch perfect on how they captured it all. It was, so let's start with the punchline, right? Tom Wambsgans as the CEO. And Tom becoming the CEO actually led me to reflect on a type of narcissistic person we often don't think about, which is the sycophant narcissist. The sycophant is basically a fancy word for a suck up. It was an inspired choice by the moderately psychopathic Lucas, who knows that Tom will always be his, I'm trying to say this without a gendered slur. Tom will always be at his behest. So he will be able to, Tom is basically a proxy, and all Tom ever wanted was to feel important. But we could see after the ATN disaster, Tom is in no position to be a CEO. So this was perfect for Lucas to have a proxy, to have his American CEO, but no, he could totally run roughshod over this guy. In effect, Lucas will be able to run the company and his people will be able to run the company. So let's kind of start from the top with, as I've always said, Shiv, most like her father, and right to the end, most like her father. She was the one who sort of put the knife in the back. And what Shiv has done, and it's not lost on me actually that Shiv also means like it's a slang for a knife that like usually a prisoner will make a knife out of like whatever they can find and stick it between someone's sort of ribs or shoulder blades. Well, she is a Shiv in every way. And so here we have with Shiv that shape-shifting capacity that every narcissistic person has. Kendall, basically almost being so narcissistic, never got. He should have actually been watching this YouTube channel because he would have known Shiv could never be trusted and that Shiv's yes was never a yes. And so he didn't get that. It was very clear to me. I was like, how is Shiv going to stick this to him? And then when the hoofbeats were sounding, and then it became clear that Tom was going to be the CEO and Shiv had a chance to sit on that, she knew exactly what she had. She actually had now a pathway to sort of do her thing. And while it'll be humiliating and shameful because she wasn't the one named, she actually has a lot of her own proxy power now. Because if she continues to stay in her sham of a sadomasochistic marriage, that she will then be at least in right next to the corridors of power. She's carrying the child of the person in power, and she'll probably start having sex with Lucas. So Shiv's going to play it every which way she can. And it likely became very clear to her that she was actually going to be able to carve that into more power than anything she would ever do with Kendall. So Shiv was her father's daughter right to the end. But let's go back to a line that Logan said probably about before he died, obviously. So I think it was earlier, very early in the season when they were in the karaoke place and he turned to his kids and he said, "You are not serious people." That was what Roman sort of was making clear when he's like, "We're bullshit. We are just BS people." There was that moment of recognition. I think Roman always had it. For Roman, sort of being a part of the company was always play acting. And he's sort of been brought down to his very essence, but they are all BS. All three of them are BS. Logan built that company through his sheer psychopathy, determination, hard work. They have not. This was them forever trying to volley in position to sort of get their father's validation. That's not what their father did. Their father built a company out of nothing. Ironically, Shiv became her mother. Every bit as cold, snake-like, calculating. Shiv will be an absolutely terrible narcissistic mother. And ultimately, what is Shiv? Shiv is now going to marry the CEO. She's become her mother. And I thought that was a really nice kind of ironic twist at the end. Any story, novel, play, television show, or film about narcissistic people is always going to be tragic. You can try to make a comedy out of it, but it's always going to be a dark comedy and it's always going to end badly. And if there's only one thing we've learned, and that really played out perfectly in this end of Succession, is that a narcissistic person is like a scorpion. No matter what, they are always going to sting you. There's no winning a scorpion over. So that sort of sweet night of them fooling around in the mother's kitchen in the Caribbean that was sort of almost like we as an audience were being set up, because I was like, that something's going to go wrong. Because as anyone in a narcissistic relationship knows, those good moments are always going to crash and burn. That's the struggle with these relationships. Forget Succession for a minute. Just look at your own life. Every narcissistic relationship has those beautiful moments. The nice day, the nice afternoon, the nice vacation, the fun thing. But spend enough time in one of these relationships and you know the other shoe is going to drop. And as not unexpected, the other shoe sort of dropped. So let me go back and grab up some other patterns. It's interesting because what they had a lot of was those patterns of dysregulation, right? Every single narcissistic person in the show, which is everybody, was in some way disappointed, right? Kendall getting that news at the beginning, disappointed. Roman sort of having this, crisis of faith. Shiv getting disappointed. The narcissist's incapacity to cope. They typically go right to vindictiveness, right to rage. Even Lucas and his tantrum. Everybody is vindictive on the show because everybody is narcissistic. Now, one piece that's very intriguing to me, and I'm sorry I'm jumping around, but I think my head is sort of succession spinning. One piece of me that's really fascinating is Greg remains the dark horse, because everyone has to remember Greg knows about all those documents that got shredded, and Greg didn't shred them all. So Greg still has the goods on Tom, and Tom knows it. So when he put that little sticker of things they want to claim, again, it spoke to how everyone, every human being, every human relationship on that show is an objectification and a transaction. But Greg is going to be actually in a more powerful position with Tom as CEO, because Tom will, in many ways, it's like, what Greg has on Tom is the whole Kendall having killed someone, killing the waiter in the early seasons when he drove off the road, right? Whether or not that, and that whole idea that he was even able to lie about it, that he would do anything, he would lie about anything to get this thing, to be the head of this thing. Like he said, it's the only thing I know how to do. But with Greg has that ace in the hole, and he will always have it. So Tom will have no choice but to keep him close and continue abusing him. Now, if Greg had not had that smoking gun, heaven help Greg is all I have to say. Of course, another great Greg moment, and this is why young people are going to slowly are sort of winning in the digital battle, was using the translation app to figure out what they were saying. Greg was always too clever by half, right? He was always trying to find a way to volley for position. And so obviously then he wanted to be part of the so-called quad. The quad was never quite interested in having him with all the Roy siblings. And so him giving them that intel is what led to this whole kind of this unraveling. And then Tom perceiving not only Greg's infidelity and lack of loyalty, if you will, but I also think that in Greg's lack of loyalty, strangely enough, I think ultimately Tom will bizarrely respect that, because he's a snake. Everyone on this show is a snake. There's no non-snakes on the show, other than sort of the people, even the people in service, maybe just the bodyguard guy, because clearly, what is that guy's name? Hugo. Clearly Hugo is a snake, willing to shapeshift for anyone. Carolina's probably toast, poor thing, but maybe not. Tom asked for Carolina, so maybe she'll come out, but everyone's a snake. There are no snakes, there are no non-snakes on this show. Okay. There was a line that Lucas used, the CEO of Gojo, the Scandinavian dude, that really stuck with me because it so captures what happens in every narcissistic relationship. Basically, Lucas was sizing up Tom to be his, his kind of puppet CEO. And he used the term, I want you to be my pain sponge. And I thought that was, if everyone in a narcissistic relationship is a damn pain sponge. Interestingly, Tom is again, I don't want to use crude references. Tom is such a sycophant. He's a great pain sponge. He's almost been training for this for his entire time with Shiv. He has taken groveling and he could offer a master class on it. So, but that idea of being a pain sponge, I thought was such an interesting metaphor for what happens in every narcissistic relationship. And with Lucas, that's why I'm saying is he's more in the sociopathy, psychopathy realm, is he's so unfiltered with it. He's like, yeah, I'm going to use and abuse you. That's just how it's going to be. I want to have sex with your wife. We probably are. Like he was testing and messing with Tom, but Tom didn't falter. So it really showed Lucas what a puppet that Tom was. So again, I thought that was an interesting kind of an interaction. But again, Lucas is the big fish who's going to eat Tom, who's the next smaller fish, who is trying to eat Greg, but he needs Greg, so he can't fully eat him. I mean, you got to love Caroline, worst mother on the planet. Shiv's about to become the second worst mother on the planet. But, you know, there's always that those passive aggressive digs. You know, Caroline is chronically inconvenienced by her children. What do you mean you're not going to stay for dinner? You're in the middle of a huge crisis, but you have to do what I want. And when she saw the scene when her 3 kids were getting along for that brief moment, when they had sort of left Kendall with the illusion for a moment he was going to be the CEO, and she saw them getting along, she thought, oh, it's so wonderful to see you bonding over something other than what a terrible mom I am. That was such a narcissistic parent play, right? That even when there's a moment of goodness, it has to be turned into the narcissistic parent being a victim. But that's Caroline, and that's just simply who she is. The entire scene with the stickers was an interesting one where they are having to put the stickers on all their things. Connor has like a Tom vibe. He's so lame and it's so idiotic. And what's interesting is what's kind of hanging out there, and I'm going to speak more about this, is that Jared Mencken may not get certified, as the election may not get certified with Mencken being president. If Mencken's not president, then Connor will not become the ambassador to Slovenia or whatever place he's going. Willa is obviously already seeing this as the opportunity. She'd already viewed this as a transactional marriage, but putting the stickers on the things. And for Connor, it always was that reductionistic. While Connor didn't have the same level, he was impacted differently by their father, obviously different marriage. And in a way, the character went through different kinds of traumas, with the mother being involuntarily committed pretty much for her lifetime. But with Connor, he had become very transactional, and the little sticker dots were such a great example of that. My favorite was when he pointed to the other room and said, that's the second tier bereaved. Once again, that objectification of everybody there, is that everyone is an object in this grander universe. And that's every narcissistic world. They kept trying to register that loss and grief, that strange trauma bond they had with their father. But ultimately, none of them were going to be qualified to be CEO, because it was never about running the company well. It was always about some sort of avenging. I'm the one who deserved. No, it should be me. It's never about the job. It was never about running it right. The interesting thing to me is Lucas, much like Logan, built a company up from nothing. And so in a way, Lucas is in a better position to do it. He actually resembles Logan in that way much more than Logan's own children. So that wasn't lost on me. That's how I knew this Gojo deal was going to go through, because that would actually be a more appropriate sort of scrappy fighter, psychopathic sort of stewardship to this entire thing. There was a scene that, listen, as a narcissism person, it wasn't lost on me. When Roman kept looking in the mirror, that little bar mirror in the office, and he was having that tremendous moment of grief, right? Looking at his wounds and all of that. I thought it was so interesting to me, I couldn't let it go, that here was the narcissist, Roman being that combination of vulnerable and malignant narcissist. And the narcissist was looking in the mirror, but in this case, he wasn't falling in love with his reflection. It was fascinating to me to see how much Roman's fragility is coming through. He's going to do fine after this happens. Him getting out of this system he's always going to be a horrible person, but it's actually going to play out as a win for him. That I can see. And so what was fascinating to me was in that room, and probably the most pivotal scene in the entire episode, entire show probably, was the 3 of them in that conference room. The defeated, deflated, cruel Roman, this close to his childhood vindication dream, Kendall, and the ever cruel and vindictive Shiv. Shiv did the calculation. She was not going to let Kendall be the CEO. She kept making it about, oh, you're not going to be able to do it. But Kendall couldn't have played that right. Ultimately, when he is at his ultimate moment of fear, what did he do? I can do this. I deserve this. It needs to be me. He went right into that egocentricity. Shiv could have been played at that moment. She really could have. But no, no, no. Kendall, again, this is what you have to remember about narcissistic folks. When the pressure is on that tight, that frontal lobe inhibition is gone for them. It's a very impulsive personality. He couldn't stop himself from just making it only about him and attacking Shiv for not seeing that he could do it. And that he could have, again, if he'd been skillful enough, his father would have been able to do this. He could have played Shiv, but he wasn't. He was too panicked, as a vulnerable narcissistic person would be. And then Shiv, again, more like her father, had done the calculation and recognized that in this sort of solution going forward, she would be able to actually get much closer, in some ways, be the Roy family representative at the top of this new sort of company. But ultimately, what this episode taught us, something I talk about around narcissistic relationships all the time, these are not hopeful places. These are places of no hope, and no hope there was indeed. They took us on a wild ride for these 4 seasons. But what it was a reminder of is every time, and I think that was so beautifully done in the shows, we'd get our hope. Oh, look at them. They're getting along in the kitchen. Oh, look at them. They're going to support Kendall. And you can see how we get pulled into these cycles. But there is no hope in any narcissism story. It will never land the right way. And I think that that's why these stories are chronically so tragic and so awful and let people down. And when we're watching it happen to other people, we may feel removed from it. But anyone who's been through a narcissistic relationship knows that's what the cycle is. So what's going to happen to everyone? Because that's really always the interest, right? Can we speculate based on what we know about their personalities, how this is going to go down? You bet we can. Kendall is going to crumble. I think a lot of people thought Kendall was going to meet his demise, that he was going to end his life. That's not his way. Kendall will have this, this sort of, I think he will separate from his family from good. I think Roman went a bridge too far, making comments about the children's parentage and speaking so dismissively about them. I have to say, I've always been kind of on the fence. I'm like, is there a human being in Roman? That scene showed me there's actually not. He's pretty much a soulless, absolutely soulless creature. And so he's almost like a creature of the dark, like somebody who lives in the mud or in a swamp. So Kendall will be crushed forever. He will... Kendall will probably get prematurely sick, will probably die younger than anyone expected. He's going to get his billions of dollars, and he'll probably, listen, if somebody gave me $1 billion, I'd be like, peace, everyone. I'm out. I'm never working another day in my life. But I'm not Kendall. And so, but in Kendall's case, that money, he'll keep trying to start businesses, but nothing is ever going to be this legacy of his father's, right? He's not going to build it that big. It's not going to be, it's always going to be, would my dad be proud? Would my dad be proud? Well, your dad's dead, so he's not going to know. And so that is forever going to be the monkey on Kendall's back. Kendall has almost been doomed to a horrible life of suffering. That's exactly what happened to Narcissus in the story. He was doomed to a life of suffering. Those of you who thought Kendall might end his life, it actually would have been consistent with the myth. But I actually think in many ways, Kendall's life, this was a metaphorical end to his life. There is no more life for Kendall. He is sort of dead at this point. It's all gone for him. Roman, it wanted out. He could not handle, for him, it was being close to his father and his trauma bonded relationship and the dark, twisted relationship he had with Jerry. But for Roman, it's really going to be a relatively dissipated life. He'll sort of be man about town, sort of the half-wit that he is. He will continue to be cruel. He will continue to have massive sexual dysfunction. His suffering will be different than Kendall's, but there won't be much of a life. Shiv will be an interesting story because Shiv will figure out ways to stay close to the power. She's going to have this child with Tom. They may be able to make this horrific marriage work. She will probably try to get into bed with Lucas. She'll be a player in the story for a long time. Greg will also remain in the game, mostly because he has the goods on Tom. So as long as Tom holds a seat at the table, and for whatever reason, I think that they like having him around as sort of, I think narcissistic people like having around harmless people that they can bully. It's a very cruel dynamic, but Lucas and that weird bearded guy that hangs around him, the Swedish guy, they seem to like get sport out of humiliating Greg. And so I think they're going to keep him around as a bit of a lapdog, but Greg may profit a bit from this. People like Carl and Frank are just going to take their golden parachutes. They're going to be, feel humiliated when they're kicked off to the side, but This is all they ever wanted in the first place. Jerry's going to stick around. Tom's incompetent. Jerry's not. So it's interesting. In Jerry and Shiv, two women are going to end up having a pretty substantial amount of power as this entire thing moves forward. If Mencken doesn't get certified or confirmed as the president, then Connor's toast. And then he's going to be stuck living in that big house with the transactional woman who can't stand to look at him and has so much contempt for him. Marcia will be fine. She was only in it for the money. And I think she had some kids who were sort of fringy, and she's going to support them and she'll be fine. I mean, Carrie, I think she probably did love the guy as much as anyone could love a malignant narcissist, but she'll move on to someone else and she'll figure out her way. She seems to, I'm sure she will land on her feet. Lucas is going to be fine. Lucas is psychopathy/sociopathy. He's a lot more like Logan. He has that psychology, so he's going to be fine. He's just going to go through this as like any one of these tech bro, one person, conscienceless wrecking crews. He's not going to care who hears in the process, and he'll almost be like too big to fall. And I think he was constructed as a lot of these sort of tech magnates who are just terrible people. And who am I leaving out? Did I get everyone? People on the board. We got Marcia. Caroline is going to live her ridiculous life with Peter. She will continue to sort of flit in and out of her kids' lives. The question would be, will these siblings ever talk to each other again? That's always the question. Will Kendall stay out of the mix? My guess is he may very well. The best thing that could ever happen to these three siblings is that they never have anything to do with each other again. But that's my guess. And that, and then that will be sort of the end of that story, that with the father and the triangulation and the betrayal and the chaos he created, that was actually the only connective tissue between all the people in that family. When he went and there was nothing to fight over, there was nothing connecting the people in it. And so the entire sort of group of people will dissipate. So them's my thoughts. I thought it was as well a told story about narcissism as I've ever seen in my life. I thought it was spectacular. It was beautifully made, beautifully written, beautifully acted. It was television on a level I never dreamed. I've talked to so many people really recently saying, I can't stand that show. How can you watch it? And I'm like, how could I not? So yes, that was our narcissism porn. It was lovely sharing this season with you. I'm glad to have my Sunday nights back. And I'm going to go on to a comedy next time. So anyhow, so that I think that's it. We're going to say goodbye to this absolute masterpiece of narcissistic storytelling in the modern age. And for anyone who thinks, oh, this is just overblown, it can't be that bad. They just had a lot more money and a lot more jets. Every single dynamic we saw in Succession could be reduced down to any narcissistic relationship, system, family I've ever seen. It's all there. Thanks again. Good night.